Good afternoon. My name is Alan Detloff, and I'm very proud and honored to be Dean of the Graduate College of Social Work at the University of Houston. Today, I'm very happy to welcome you to the second event in our Spring 2021 Eyes on Abolition series, in which we continue to explore abolition as a vision, abolition as practice, and abolition as a critical framework to bring about change, and specifically a framework to address the racial violence, racial disparities, and the racist outcomes we see in our carceral systems. We often think of our carceral systems as being the prison industrial complex and the criminal punishment system that maintains the prison industrial complex, but the carceral state is much larger than that. Of particular note for social workers, the carceral state also includes what some people refer to as the child welfare system or child protective services, but is better known as the family policing system because of its significant role in the surveillance, regulation, and punishment of Black and Brown families. So today we're going to look at this broader view of the carceral state that also includes mental health system, and we're going to explore social work's role in these systems and social work's complicity in the racist outcomes that these systems produce. If you joined us for our first event last fall with Ruth Wilson Gilmore, you heard Dr. Gilmore describe abolition as a way of seeing. She said, abolition makes you ask, when you look at our systems, what are you seeing and what would you rather see? What we see now when we look at our carceral systems are systems that disproportionately surveil Black and Brown bodies and Black and Brown communities. We see systems that forcibly separate Black and Brown children from their parents, and systems that lock people in cages as a means of resolving societal problems, whether those cages are prison cells, detention centers, or foster homes. So today we're going to explore this further, and we're going to talk about what we'd rather see. And now I'm very happy to welcome Feminista Jones to this conversation. I had the honor of inviting Feminista to speak at the opening plenary for the Society for Social Work and Research Conference in January 2020, and she was an incredible speaker and opened the eyes of many people there to some of the harms that social work has historically caused to Black families. So I was very excited to be able to invite her to join us to continue this conversation as part of our Eyes on Abolition series. Feminista Jones is a Philadelphia-based feminist writer, public speaker, a retired social worker, and community activist. She's an award-winning blogger and the author of 4 books, including the critically acclaimed 2019 release, Reclaiming Our Space: How Black Feminists Are Changing the World from the Tweets to the Streets. Her writing and activism centers Black American culture, feminism, critical race theory, intersectionality, mental health, poverty, and women's health and well-being. Feminista began her career as a social worker in 2002 and dedicated 17 years of her career to advocating for and supporting people experiencing poverty, hunger, homelessness, substance addiction, and psychiatric disabilities until 2018. In 2015, she co-founded and served as general director of the Women's Freedom Conference, the first all-digital conference completely organized by and featuring only women of color. In 2014, she launched a global anti-street harassment campaign and a national moment of silence protesting police brutality, both of which received international media attention. That same year, she was named one of the top 100 Black social influencers by The Root. Feminista is also a mom, a mentor to young girls and women, and an outspoken advocate for the homeless, people living in poverty, and those living with psychiatric disabilities. And joining Feminista today is our moderator, GCSW's very own assistant professor, Quinette Walton. Dr. Walton received her PhD from the University of Illinois at Chicago Jane Addams College of Social Work, where her research focused on depression experiences and wellness among middle-class African-American women. Dr. Woodman is also a licensed clinical social worker and has over 10 years of practice experience in social work, child welfare, and with community-based organizations. So please help me welcome Feminista Jones and Dr. Quinette Walton.
Thank you so much, Alan. So good to see you.
You too. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Doc.
Hello, hello. We're back at it.
We're back at it. Are they ready? You think they're ready?
I'm ready.
I think they're ready. I think they're ready for us.
Well, we'll see. Right? We're so grateful. I cannot say enough to have you back. And granted, it's for a short period of time, and we're going to have a conversation about how to change the world, right?
In a short period of time.
Right. But what you started, right, what I think is very important is for social workers at our conference to really start thinking about some of the ways in which we contribute to the issues that we'll be discussing today. And so you gave direct examples of how we are complicit, right? And the harms and violence of white supremacy, and by extension, what social work has caused. And so I hope today we can dive a little bit deeper and explore specifically what those harms are, think about it in the context of solutions, right? And then leave people with some charges, right?
Yeah.
Change. So
yeah.
You have a lot on your plate today.
Yeah, it's funny because so here's one of the things. It's like when I was at the other conference, people were really like, you got to become your PhD in social work. And I was like, I don't want to do that. But I actually am now getting my PhD. It's in Africology and African American Studies with a minor in gender, sexuality, and women's studies. So it's not social work, everyone, but I am on that. So many of you reached out to me after, was like, you need to become a professor. I felt that, I received that. So I'm on my way. So yes, I do have a lot on my plate right now.
On your plate. And then now you can share with us what that experience has been like and some of that expertise in terms of how do we create solutions, right? Oppressive systems.
Absolutely.
And how Dean talked about the carceral system being best understood as a comprehensive network, right? Of systems that rely on, at least in part, the exercise of state-sanctioned physical, right, emotional, spatial, economic, political. We can go on and on with those violence to preserve the interest of state. And so let's begin our conversation by asking how social workers show up, right, and participate in the emotional, spatial, economic, and political violence of the carceral state through collaboration, right, and cooperation.
Right. This topic and this question is so relevant to the times we are in right now, because people are really kind of waking up into the ways that the system contributes to their daily experience and really shapes their experience on all levels. It doesn't matter what race, class, whatever, especially in the wake of how our government handled COVID, you really see how these systems work. And a lot of us who had been immune to a number of things, really, it's become exposed what the problems were. COVID didn't create the problems. It really exposed the problems of these systems, right? And when we think about social work, it's really about assessing value and potential, isn't it? And that's horrifying when you really think about it, right? What is a social worker's job? It's to come in, assess what the problem is, figure out a solution to fix it. And you're supposed to do that objectively. But there is no objectivity in when you're assessing another human being, because it's all coming from your own position and your stance. And so I think about that a lot, like our jobs, essentially, especially the direct people, is to figure out, what is this person's potential? What are they taking away from society? How will they contribute to society? Are they worth the energy and the time, the limited time and energy I have to try to help them? Or, we make these value judgments every single day. And that is a function of white supremacy and capitalism, right? And there's no capitalism without white supremacy. So what we're doing is we're actually doing the work of capitalism by assessing value and associating things like that. That's where we have to start thinking about, like, how we're complicit in this, right? And so, when we think about some examples of it, my background was definitely in mental health and housing and things like that. We have housing programs that require sobriety for 6 months before you get a place to live. How does that work? We are dangling this essential need of shelter over someone's head in order to move forward. But we said, no, you're not worthy of having a place to live if you use drugs. Meanwhile, we are decriminalizing and legalizing drugs all around this country and still have these odd mandates within our field, right? I mean, some of us have been more progressive. I worked actually in a housing first kind of space, but you look at that, or something like, to get transitional employment, you have to prove X, Y, and Z and all these other things. And it's just like, what does this have to do with me being able to type a letter and be an assistant? You know what I mean? Like, what does this have to do? I think it's kind of wild when police are escorting social workers from child removals, like just even the concept of that, or when you call for someone who's in psychiatric distress and 12 police officers show up. Why are you here? And that's what we're seeing. The organizers and the grassroots workers are really calling for, like, we need more supportive services, but the social workers cannot come into the communities attached at the hip with the police that are causing the problems in the communities, you know, that lead to that need.
Yeah.
You know?
But so you're tapping into another question that we want to ask, right? In terms of this history of social workers being connected to systems, right? Like the child welfare system, like the police system, right? And some people would think child welfare and social work are synonymous. And so, of course, we know that may not be true. I'm not going to say either. And so many social workers can put forth the duties of the child welfare system without issue. And so when we look at it, and Black children being overrepresented in that system, and brown children as well for over 50 years, and they remain that nearly double the rate, right? Can we talk about what that relationship between white supremacy and social work is, and so we manifest in child welfare?
So absolutely, we have to go back to the beginning. So here's the thing is that, like, you know, I came into this profession knowing full well it was racist, right? And it was racist because it was classist. So if we really think about the origins of social work, it was created because the state decided that poor people, particularly if you're looking in Europe after feudalism and all of that kind of broke down, the state was looking at poor people as being a threat to society. So we have to create these programs and get these people who can basically manage the poor and help them. But really, it's help them not mess up what we have going on, right? So looking at poor people as a blight, as a blemish to societies, right? That's why white people call their poor people trash, like the only group that calls their own group trash, right? So, you know, kind of these systems, these organizations, agencies were all created to basically clean up the poverty issue without eradicating the poverty, which again, does not make any sense, but that's how it came to be. And then when you're coming to the United States, which was founded upon racism, that is what the United States stands for. It's founded upon racism. You cannot disconnect racism from classism. So yes, if the job is to treat the poor or to handle the poor, it's also to handle the Black and brown people, right? Because of how they're inextricably linked. And so starting there, you know, and I want to make clear to everybody, like, child welfare was not my background, but I absolutely understand, you know, how there is this child welfare to prison pipeline. There is this child welfare to death pipeline, if we're going to be honest, right? And it's all connected with the white supremacy and the capitalism. What we're talking about right now is, you know, when you're looking at the overrepresentation of Black children in this system, what you're looking at is an exploitable labor class. And I talk about this all of the time. Where does capitalism go if it doesn't have people to exploit for labor? Right. And so one of the things that we know is when we look at families, right, and it doesn't matter how we structure family, because goodness, we can get into the nonsense around this nuclear family idea, but we're talking safe environment, stability, care, love, these things that children need. When you come in and disrupt that at an early age, we talk about early interventions. When you come in with this negative intervention and you're disrupting that, what you're doing is you're possibly setting this child on a pathway towards making them someone you can later exploit for labor. Right. So when I challenge social workers to think, is this intentional? Right. And are we complicit in this? Particularly those of us that are in that early intervention space. What do we have to do? Because that is what capitalism is demanding. Capitalism requires that we have this underclass that can be exploited. And it's happening with the children, the descendants of enslaved people. It's never ended. It's never ended. We have been deemed as only being worthy to serve the upper class, to serve the white upper class, to function for white supremacy. And social workers have to look at how their actions, their biases all factor in and are complicit in that.
I'm looking forward to talking with you about solutions, because as an educator, right? And teaching master level social work students and preparing, right, PhD students to do to qualitative work in particular. I think there's some richness to that. I may be biased, but like how like really being able to tease out how do we help them do that, right, in a way that they can change a system but still stay in the system, right? So I'm really looking forward to some of what those.
Sure. And we'll be getting there.
I can't wait. Our college, the Graduate College of Social Work, has partnered with the Center for the Study of Social Policy to launch the Upend movement with the specific goal of abolishing the child welfare system, right? That's old. Dean Detloff has written in the Journal of Public Child Welfare that it is not a broken system. It's a system that needs to be broken. And I'm wondering if you can share your thoughts on that and what social workers can do or can be thinking about with respect to breaking the system, given the specific harms of that approach, and should social workers be engaged in organizing those type of efforts, right, to denounce those actions, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think, again, so I always exist in this kind of existential space of like really questioning and getting to the root of it. What does child welfare mean?
Yes.
Like, what is it? Like, what welfare are we talking about? What are the things that we have determined are essential for a child to be protected, safe, loved, adequately taken care of? And by whose standards are those things defined, right? And what is child welfare in the context of deciding which children have the most value and potential for the future? I will continue to come back to value and values assessments, because this connection to the carceral system really is about the state determining who is worth fighting for and who we get to throw away. And so social workers are some of the first people to make those value assessments on children, on people, on human beings. So when you're entering homes, when you are devising treatment plans or service plans that are related to helping a family and servicing children, what standards are you designing those? Is it a white supremacist standard? Is it a one that is not culturally relevant? Are we suggesting that all children should be raised the same and have the same, exactly the same thing? No, we talk about, yes, we want equal access to opportunities, but we have to accept that every family looks and feels different, and that we have to check our own biases when we walk in. One of the things I'll never forget, one of my friends was telling me about, because she did child welfare for a while. She said she had an argument with a colleague who talked about the house stinking. And she had gone, and it was an immigrant family from West Africa. Talked about the house stinking, and that it suggested that there was neglect. And then she went in with her colleague the next time, and they were cooking. Okay, it was cooking food that this woman found, this white social worker found so repugnant that she determined that this smell in the house was foul and bad for the child. So that's just one example of like how that bias shows up and how it can harm families. So then you go and you write your report, and you're suggesting that this child is being neglected or harmed because you didn't like the smell.
Yes.
You see what you know what I mean? So when we're talking about, so any system that allows for that absolutely needs to be dismantled. So what do you do about it, right? Well, first, you're in a leadership position, right? I remember we were talking at the conference, it was a lot of researchers and people on that doctoral level. But for those that are doing the day-to-day work and are, in those spaces, if you're in leadership, your job is to create new programs and programmatic approaches. And so that's what I ended up doing. I started in direct service, but I was like, no. I got to get to the admin. I got to get to administration, because there's not enough of this here in the admin, right? You have so many social service agencies that are run by white male MBAs and JDs who have never done a day of direct service in their life, right? We need more of us in these spaces crafting the programs, crafting and designing the approach, one that is more supportive, culturally relevant, centers these people and their experiences. Even if you're not in a leadership position and you're sitting in the meetings where this kind of stuff is happening, you have to speak up and you have to say, listen, I get that you all think X, Y, Z, but if you have a personal experience, and like I did, growing up, I've talked about that a little bit before, but I won't get into it as much today, but I have experience with being in situations that child welfare would have deemed harmful and would have separated me from my mother, which would have been the worst thing that could have possibly happened to me in my life. And so, we need to have those of us that maybe have those experiences need to be bold and courageous enough to come and speak and say, no, that doesn't work. That is not what I needed. That's not what I could have used. Here's how we approach it, right? We were talking about the sister in Ohio, right? Who her child was, it was she left her in a hotel because she was working or something like that, right? Who decided that is an imminent threat to the child? And I don't think that if this was a white mother, that same approach would have been taken
Yeah.
But because, Black and brown mothers are so vilified and automatically just seen as bad mothers, it is hard for these workers to come in and see anything other than neglect. And that is rooted in enslavement. That is rooted in white women's determinations about Black mothers and taking Black mothers from their own children. It's rooted in so much. And, I just had to say one final thing about that, because this is what really gets me. Other countries, when children are born, parents are assigned support systems. They are given care packages. They are given classes. They are given all these kinds of things that help them transition into being parents and healthy parents and wonderful parents. The United States, hey, 2 days, goodbye. Best of luck. See you for your follow-up. Make sure that, your wounds are healed.
Right.
Why are we not investing in making sure that every new parent has free, accessible support from before the child is born to prepare? Why are we not making sure that this is not something that you have to opt in, but that you are already present in these communities ahead of time and ready? Baby's coming, we are ready. Let's go. Let's take this holistically. Doulas, family, friends, community. Let's welcome this child into love. And here, as parts of the state, we are going to support you in this transition.
Yeah.
You know why we're not doing it? Because we don't want the children to be born into those situations. Because if we did, we would do it. It's that simple. And sometimes people don't like to hear that, but it is that simple, sis. Like, it really is.
Should social workers be engaging in organizing efforts to formally denounce such actions?
Oh, absolutely.
Solutions outside of carceral systems?
Oh, absolutely. Again, as I said earlier, social workers are often the first line of assessment, of defense, of protection, of advocacy, of detriment. It really is on social workers to come together and put out statements and put out actions and say, no, we're not going to do this anymore. I think what Alan, wrote, absolutely, to take that kind of stance is radical, right? Especially for a system that was created to basically cage up these poor children. He's saying, we're not doing this, so I kudos to him and everybody else that is willing to come forward. But he also has that privilege, right, presenting as a white male to do so. So we need more of you with that privilege to come and say, you know what, we agree and we have solidarity. And again, my cat has decided to join us, and I apologize, everyone. Okay, I knew that she does not let me speak without showing her face. Okay. so yes, that's where social workers. Absolutely, we have an obligation. And, it's funny when I say I'm a retired social worker, I'm not doing that, but we're always social workers. We're social workers until we transcend into something else, in the outside of this. So yes, we all have to commit to that.
Yeah, which is so important, right? And the timing now cannot be even more critical, right?
Yeah, right. Particularly because look at what we haven't begun to consider the other side of COVID and the impact that it's had. Not just, of course, the economic impact is the top of everybody's list, which is why everything's being so rushed. Because again, capitalism, white supremacy. If we're not working, if the lower class or whatever is not working, then these wealthy white people are really going to lose what they have. So they're really pushing, and they don't care whether we're sick and dying or not, right? So not just the economic, not just the socioeconomic, but the political, right? So we have this new political kind of system, regime, as whatever we want to call it, that is, making all these promises that we have to hold them to the fire. But the mental health impact of isolation, right? And again, when I say that we are now starting to understand what advocates have been talking about for so long, because we're finally experiencing it, we definitely have to think about what it's going to look like on the other side. I'm in Philadelphia, just found out yesterday that gun violence to this point is up 30% from this time last year. It is completely out of control. I mean, every day, several people are being killed by guns in Philadelphia. It is terrifying to the point where I'm like, I need to move, and I'm planning to move this summer. I cannot have my son risk him just walking out in the street right now, and then I'm getting a call that something happened. So we are going to be dealing with the after effects of COVID and what it has done to already depressed cities and neighborhoods. So social workers got to really start thinking like this could possibly be a time to be radical, to think differently, to come in with a new approach. because we have no choice at this point.
And it's also intergenerational, the piece that you're talking about as well, right? Because we look at it this one moment in time, but over time, right, down the road, given all the loss, it's going to be compounded in ways that we can't.
Oh, absolutely. And we have to use the tools that we have. Like so many of us came to this because we are healers, because this is really what we are passionate about. And we have to come in and be ready to how do we get society to regroup? And get back on track to improvement, because we were already struggling before. But now it feels like we've taken some steps back because of the economic impact of this pandemic, right?
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about abolition, right? And the University of Houston Graduate College of Social Work has been focusing on abolition, and we want to ask you about solutions for abolitionism, from an abolitionist framework. And so going back to our very first conversation in the series with Dr. Ruth Wilson Gilmore, where she shared abolition is a way of seeing, right? And it makes us ask, when you look, what are you seeing, and what would you rather see? Can you apply that frame to social work? And what would you rather see with respect to how the profession shows up, not only for social justice, but also for true liberation?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to go back to the values. This is about assessing value. And so we're talking about, what are people seeing? Well, they're seeing whatever they've been socialized to see, especially when they're looking at Black and brown faces, right? Are they actually seeing human beings that are worthy of investment? Or what are the assumptions being made about living conditions? Like I used the example earlier, how are we coming into spaces and just assessing value and saying, okay, well, this is how things should be. That's basically what we do as social workers. We come in with our idea of how something is supposed to be and how it's supposed to look, and then we decide whether or not these people that we're working with are meeting that standard or included in that. We have to disrupt that, and that's a micro level kind of example, because that's really what's happening in our carceral system, is that society excuse me, is making a value judgment, value assessment on who's worth investing and working with and who's not. Are we going to put people in drug treatment, or are we going to lock them up? Are we going to offer people alternatives to incarceration, or are we just going to lock them up and throw away the key? And so much of that is based on our own biased assessments of their value and their potential. So what I would like to see social workers do is really commit to divesting of their own socialization, their own biases, right? We all learn about the history of our fields, and we learn, a lot of us came from sociology as well, and we move we got to let go of all that, because it's all racist. It's all completely racist. We have to really let go. It's classist, it's racist, it's sexist, it's queerphobic. We have to commit to divesting of that and committing to designing a radical framework that fully embraces the totality of all human beings. And that is, it's not impossible. It's not impossible when you consider that every human being is worthy of dignity, honor, and respect. So it's not that hard. But
I'm sorry, but you're asking us to reimagine something that we have no tools nor framework for, right?
I'm asking us to come up with a framework. All these doctors that were in the audience that day, you telling me we can't come up with a new framework and a new way of.
But it's grounded in research, feminist.
But you know what? Yes, right. So again, we're even looking at our research methods. And the racism in those, and the classism in those. We need new ethnographic methods, new research methods, new ways of doing. And one of the things I say, and again, so I'm in Africology. We definitely think about Afrocentricity, centering the people. Not our own ideas about how society should function, but let's center the people themselves and their lived experiences. And that means more qualitative work that is really just listening to what people say they need and they want, and taking that as valuable research as something else. That has to be as meaningful in the book. This person says, I don't like the book bag program where you put food in my child's book bag at the end of the week because my child feels ashamed and feels burdened that they're responsible for feeding me. You have to listen to that. And when you go on and say, well, the book program is the best program for parents, you weren't listening. You see what I mean? So, what is true liberation? True liberation happens when you're centering people in their own narratives, when you're making them the agents of their own success.
Yes.
Self-determination is really the key to liberation, and social workers struggle with allowing people to have self-determination because we've already got the prescription of how they're supposed to live. So we have to work on that for sure. For sure.
Yeah. Ooh. If you don't stop preaching.
You know who you asked to come. You guys know who you asked to be. I got some things to say.
I know, but right? Like, these are things that we are rubbing up against, right? When universities are putting out statements about who they stand with, but still have policies in place that are the antithesis of that, right? And so how are we showing up to get to true liberation using new forms of justice, right?
Yes, and those with the privilege are the ones who have to be the loudest about this, because there's so much fear about like what's going to happen to my career, what it's going to cost me my position and things like that. But my goodness, if we don't stand for something, we will fall for anything. And that is where we have to commit to that radical change and that radical, I'm willing to sacrifice. To make sure that this next generation is not suffering under the same oppression that I have been complicit in when I taught that class and that awful curriculum and, these racist ways of thinking and being, so.
Yes, that's so important. So important. So for social workers, we started to become aware, right? We're at this growing phase. If we think about it and how we are raised, this linear piece of infancy, right? Maybe. So we're starting to become more aware of the profession's role and the harms perpetuated by the carceral state. What would you say to those who are interested in dismantling it, right? And what are some practical steps or strategies social workers can engage in either through organizing or showing up in their work that pushes back against the harms of policing, child welfare, and all the other systems that we can line up with our discussion today?
Yeah, so, there's been a lot of talk about dismantling and disrupting and defunding and all these great D words lately. And I just got to say, one, I'm happy to see that energy is happening, right? Because we've had people talking, I guess, in silos or working in silos about it. But now we're starting to see this kind of collective movement towards really disrupting the status quo. And, the first thing I would ask is like, how far are you willing to go? And what does dismantling mean to you? Because it may mean that you no longer have a job. And are you okay with that? Right. It may mean that, tenure is out of your league. It may mean that, you're butting heads against funders who are just like, we're not paying for this work. Your organization may decide that you want to go this way, and the funders may say, we're not doing that. So how far are you willing to go, and how hard are you going to work? And then for those of you that are committed to this, like, I don't want you to feel like it's helpless, like you're hopeless and that it's impossible. Of course it is. When we all come together, we can make anything happen. And some of the things that I've been thinking about with this is like, definitely, like I said earlier, more of us in positions of leadership and decision making. So social work is definitely an ice cream cone. Brown on the bottom, white on the top. It's unfortunate that it's like that, but we cannot have people being benevolent, right? And their help, their white supremacy, actually, they're being benevolent. We want to help those, who are less fortunate. That's great, but one of the best ways to help is to pull those people up to where you are and actually listen to them and let them guide the way you're going about doing your work, right? So we need more of that. Those of you that are in social work school or have, recently graduated, please consider getting into administration.
Yes.
We feel like we're the ones responsible for healing the immediate wounds, but we also need to be the ones stopping the wounds from happening, so let's more of us there. More of us like speaking up in these decision-making settings. I think that a lot of times we tend to put our heads down because we're so offended by the thing that this colleague that we've had is saying in this meeting, that we're so stunned and caught off guard. We have to be prepared for these onslaughts. They happen. And I'm not saying that you're responsible for educating your colleague on how to not be racist or not be classist, but you also can't just silently tuck it away and not address it. So we have to be braver in our social work spaces. I think more of us need to have honest conversations amongst ourselves in our smaller groups, and also kind of doing more self-assessment. Why are you doing this? Why are you a social worker? I know what maybe 10 years ago why you did it, but why are you still here? Yeah. And what is your investment here? And when you start thinking about doing an assessment of your work, has your work upheld the status quo, or has it been working towards dismantling it? Right? We have to also remember, and I need every social worker like watching me right now to remember this. This is one of the few professions that we are working to actually go against the profession. Like, how many businesses, are actually working to destroy themselves? Social work should be, our end game is that we don't need social workers in our society anymore. And so we have to remember that we are doing that, and that we are not exploiting our people, the people in our communities, just so we can keep a job, right? And so when we talk about white supremacy and white privilege and white guilt, make sure that you're not a social worker because it makes you feel good, and that because you're doing something, because you feel you're carrying this burden of white guilt, and you feel the need to assuage it by helping the darker people in the communities. I think we could push for more radical curriculum, right? When we really look at like what's being taught, what's being offered to our, undergrads, our graduate students, is it relevant for the times, and kind of looking departments across departments. Are we really meeting the needs of what is going on in society right now? Are we still teaching some of the relic stuff? Of course, you need the historical stuff, but making sure that you are attracting professors and educators who are really have their finger on the pulse of what's happening in right now, particularly around grassroots organizing, community organizing, just kind of radical community revitalization and care, making sure that this curriculum is meeting the needs. You can stop working with the cops. That's always an option. And when I say that kind of flippantly because I am very much an abolitionist. I don't call the police when I have issues. I've cultivated enough of a network that I have people I can call, and the police are the absolute last resort. And even then, I'm still wondering, can I do something with this brick in my hand? I don't know. I don't call the police to come here. So just kind of thinking about how we can create more steps between a situation that is occurring and you needing to call the police as a social worker. And if you're a protocol mandates calling the police, maybe you need to reassess your protocols, things like that, like kind of looking on that micro level, like how can we just kind of start to sever this ties and this connection we have to this carceral state and start doing our jobs. Yes. In some ways we're relying on police to come and do social work jobs. I know we're overwhelmed, I know whatever, but we can't get lazy in this fight, right? And I think that the other thing is really kind of, I think sometimes that social workers and organizational leaders forget that you have to kind of reassess what your organization is doing every few years. You know what I mean? Not just when you're doing that 3-year funding proposal and kind of, what is our mission? What is our statement? What is our, things like that. But regularly kind of thinking like, are we doing the work, the good work, the right work, and really just being open and brave enough to kind of self-assess and make the change. And that may mean bringing in outside facilitators and people that can help your organization, like me, but, kind of thinking about, are we, again, like I said earlier, relevant with the times? Are we really connecting to the needs of the people? And if we're not, what can we do to begin to make sure that happens?
Yeah. I was writing down because what you're talking about is shifting this narrative, right? It's similar to what I'm trying to do in my work, right? From this deficit model to, and that's grounded in evidence-based, but the cultural evidence-based. Right?
Yeah, because we have to look at evidence differently, right? Absolutely. And again, so there's that bias in that too. Like, so, I'm definitely an ethnographer, and a lot of my work is definitely going to be that. And it's like, what am I looking for versus what is already there, and why am I not seeing it? Because I'm coming in with my own lens. We have to be open to seeing evidence everywhere and valuing people's lived experiences as truth that we can work with. So
So let's explore an ideal you shared about people who decide to become social workers. And you said that some social workers don't see themselves as useful unless they found a fundamental role in people being liberated. Right? Mm-hmm. If the end goal is liberation, what should social workers' role be in contributing to that goal?
So I think, you think of what social workers, a lot of times people don't feel validated unless they see a win. Right. Yeah. So I'm going to take it back to values. It says sometimes we look at the different people that we're working with and who's going to be the easy win. Yes. Who can I get into this apartment? Who's the closest to being clean? Who's this? And then we tend to put our energy into that because we want that win because it fortifies us and it reminds us this is why we do the work, whatever. Yeah. So, I think that social workers have to stop doing that. We have to start looking at everybody as someone worthy of assistance and help and give our same energy to even the most challenging situations, because not challenging people, it's challenging situations. Yes. If you find a person to be challenging, you have to understand fundamentally it's because of the conditions that they exist in and they've been raised in and the things that have influenced their lives. So what do you as a social worker do? You begin to work towards getting rid of those things that are harming these people that you want to help. Yeah. And so we constantly go into the Band-Aid kind of mode. We're just trying to heal the wounds, but we have to, as much as we're healing the wounds, we also have to start thinking like, how do we prevent this cut from even happening? And social workers sometimes don't see themselves as contributors to that, but you are. And so again, you are collecting real data. You are getting the stories. You are getting the narratives. Yes. So how are you bringing that back to your leadership, right? To your supervisors or the upper part and saying, listen, I know we said we're doing this, but what I'm seeing here out in this field or what I'm understanding is something very different. Yes. And you really have to push and advocate for a different approach and a different way of thinking about this. And then you got to kind of maybe be a trailblazer in that. And I've done that. I've done that in various spaces that I've been in when I was still actively working in social work. And I've just been the one, I felt like I got a reputation of being the naysayer because I was just like, no, I grew up in this. Yeah. I know what this is. But even if you didn't grow up in it, you could have enough reference and information to be like, no, this is not working. Yes. You guys, like, this is just not what it is. And I know that we've been doing this for so long, but look, this community is still in need. Why? We haven't healed this community yet. So obviously, we're not getting to where we need to get, right? The other thing that I really think a lot about, and I started thinking about this like about 3 years ago, is really the educational part. So you're talking about education and like the fact that our schools, I don't understand how you have schools that have no social workers or nothing at all, maybe have one for 700 or 800 students. Yes. I need social workers to come together and do whatever we need to do to get more of us into these schools. And that is whether that is protesting, that is organizing, that is pushing the mayors, the city council, the Department of Education, whatever. We have to get in those schools and we have to be working with the teachers. Yes. Okay. And so a radical idea that I had is, for those of you that are interested, you can have this for free. You get together and offer summer training and summer support for teachers who are like, I'm stuck in these schools where my hands are tied and I'm functioning almost as a social worker. You go and provide those teachers with extra support that they need so that they go, before they go back. I'm actually starting something called the Sankofa Summer School, which on my own, I was like, adults need to be educated about things. I'm just going to do it. But how about you come together collectively and say, you know what, we're going to take on this one particular school. We know that they're struggling. We can't get into school because of bureaucracy or whatever. We're going to start our own thing. It could be virtual. It could be whatever. We're going to pool our resources and we're going to work with these teachers. And we're going to offer them free support so that they can go back in and have more tools than what they left the last year drained. It's little things like that, thinking just on that level, like outside the box. Let's get creative about this community healing and our roles.
Yeah. We have 5 minutes left. The time went by so quickly.
It did.
What are the last pieces of wisdom, advice, encouragement, recommendations you have for social workers to advocate not only for this approach, but also to think boldly about what social work can be?
Right. If it were up to me, if I were to come back, I would really advocate like first year, especially on the grad level, first year should be all the education should really be about learning different cultures of people and different groups of people and what their norms are, what their cultural norms are, what their community norms are, really learning how stuff that you've already learned may have had a negative impact on you. So some of that deprogramming, I'm feeling like first year students need to get a little bit of that deprogramming, because if at the end of the year, you're still referring to folks as these people or those people, you haven't gotten it, you know? So really kind of, we're talking about radical change, changing the curriculum. I really think that social work needs a curriculum overhaul. And I think sometimes we wait until the second year or even a doctoral level to really start digging in on how this whole conversation. Now, this needs to happen first year, first semester. You know, decolonizing social work ought to be a course taught everywhere, you know, really examining the racist history and the classist history of social work and how that manifests today so that people have a fundamental understanding. I want to see more social work activists. Like, you have it in you. You chose to take a low-paying profession because you wanna help people. So that's already a little bit of activism in there. But we need to see more social workers showing up. I know my alma mater, you can actually get your MSW in community organizing. I need to see more of that across the board, where people are really like, okay, yes, I want to help, but also I'm here for the policy changing. I'm here for, you know, the working with the council and things like that. I'm not just writing notes. I'm showing up at council meetings. Social workers, show up at police meetings. Show up at council meetings. Show up at the neighborhood meetings, the tenant meetings. Show and let them know that you're a resource that even lives in their neighborhood. These may not be the people that you're working with directly, but you're there in the neighborhood, so you become a resource, right? We commit to this. We commit into the whole thing. So show up in those spaces. I want to see more social workers kind of engaging in the reciprocal education. Like, you're learning from folks like myself and others, and you're getting all this knowledge, but what are you giving back? Have more confidence in your own career, you know, that what you've done, like really feel, you know what, I actually have done some really good stuff that I could probably be sharing with other people. Maybe put together a little 60-minute, you know, webinar or something that you can share. This is what I've learned. And even if you're coming from the perspective of, say, like a white male social worker, it's like, you know what, this is what I've learned in all my years of this. Let's talk. And I encourage other white men to come and attend and listen, and let's really talk about, just come on. We got to think radically. That's what I want to impart. I want us to start thinking outside of everything we've already thought we knew that makes us a good social worker. I want us to push beyond that and start thinking radical ideas.
So let's shift to some questions from our audience. And that we have is about law and social work, because they have a comment where both professions have been very noble ideas that are actively ignored. The barriers to enter into these professions have deliberately been made to be extremely inaccessible, and where attorneys and social workers can both cause a lot of harm to people. How can you see social workers and lawyers working together to change the oppressive nature of these professions and even abolish them completely, right? And collaborate to make freedom and liberation a possibility within our lifetime?
I mean, the one thing that comes to my mind is the lawyers that work on these like civil rights cases, or that are really kind of pushing some of these, that are representing these families that have been, you know, destroyed by police violence and things like that. The ones who are like pushing to change how, you know, the local, like city, state, even federal responses to these things. Those lawyers that are really kind of just bravely going out there and saying, you know, Black Lives Matter, and you know, we need to focus on that. I think social workers can really work with lawyers in those kinds of cases, in those situations. I think lawyers providing you know, pro bono services to those who need them. I remember we relied heavily on, you know, like legal aid and other grassroots kind of lawyers the immigration law, especially. Oh my goodness. Like really just devoting some of your time, and committing to saying, I'm going to work 10% of my hours are going to go towards this particular thing. And then building maybe a network between lawyers and social workers. It's like, okay, the social workers are saying, here are the issues that we have, maybe even presenting people's, here's 5 cases right now that are really, really pressing. They have these legal issues. How can you help? And like really kind of building it so that the lawyers are like, all right, let's take this on and let's partner together, both in addressing the immediate need, but also kind of pushing and taking it to higher legislative places so that, again, we're changing things from the top and we're really working on that. I was going to be a lawyer before I became a social worker. And I actually decided to go towards social work because of the lack of representation, I think, of the experiences that I had personally. So that's why I ended up becoming a social worker. But I was almost there. So I definitely see that there is overlap and there's opportunities to build and come together.
Absolutely. What's our next question? How do we organize ourselves for a system beyond genocidal capitalism while being constantly fed or commodified by the same system?
I don't know. We're using technology, right? That is kind of like, if we really divest in, you and I aren't even having this conversation, right? Like, and so that's, you always live with that conflict. You always live with that, damn it, man. I love my MacBook and AirPods. Damn it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I am complicit, right? So if we accept that we are all complicit because Amazon just deposited another thing on our doorstep, we go beside that, our complicity in genocidal capitalism. We try to imagine, like we talked earlier, right? Reimagining a world that is not so desperately reliant upon convenience and commodities. And sometimes that really starts with like just thinking of how we eat, how we dress, what products we use every day, things like that, like how addicted we are to having things and having stuff. And social workers should be the first to think about that because we are constantly engaging people who have nothing.
Yes.
And yet they smile.
Yeah.
So how is it that these people that have nothing smile when we knock on their doors and welcome us in to these places, or, these people who show up and still have a lot to say about their day when they have nothing? We can learn from that, right? It's a slow process. It's actually, I think people that try to divest of this capitalism suffer harshly. People that try to go off the grid, for example, they suffer, they're penalized for it. So again, it's really about reimagining what it could be and think about, I don't know, honestly, I battle with this all the time. I struggle. We have to keep asking the question though. When we stop asking that question, that's when we know we have a problem.
Absolutely.
But as long as there are people still thinking about it, we're in a good place.
Absolutely. What's our next question? How do we implement the feminist theory in social work practice?
Which feminist theory? Right? Listen.
Right?
Because I gotta ask that question because right, Black feminists. What feminist theory, right? So we're talking about Angela Davis, her abolition theory. She's a Black feminist who believes in abolishing prisons and the carceral state. Are we going with her? Or are we going with, Gloria Steinem, who was an agent for the CIA? Like, who are we going with? But how do we implement it? I think that absolutely feminism is, key to, or at least this approach of the feminisms that are inclusive of, of queer and trans, disabled, poor, stuff like that. If we're applying those, what we're basically saying is that we are valuing the humanity. What I said earlier, we are valuing the humanity of every individual. We are not assessing value. We are not prioritizing the people based on their potential. We believe that everybody should have equal right and access to opportunities and the right to live freely as human beings. And that is a very feminist way of approaching that. So we can think about that. But yeah, when you say feminist, I'm like, which one? Because
right.
We're going with African feminism,
Absolutely.
So suffragette feminism. I don't know.
Next question, please. What are ways social workers can become community activists?
You kind of already are, in a sense, unless you're lying in your case notes. And then you're just you know, you already know who you are. You know, so social work. So again, like I mentioned, there are some schools that are really actually training people to do this work, right? It's specific. And I talk about this a lot. You know, I used to, when we were organizing, like back in 2014, 2015, I was like, yo, we need more people that are trained as organizers. We have the enthusiasm of people that are showing up and they're just bodies, right? We always need the bodies. We always need that energy, but we definitely need organization and we need those talents and skills. So, you know, social workers actually, if you have already gotten your degree or whatever, some more certification around community organizing, some more training related to that, really working alongside the direct workers, organizers that are already doing work. Like if you're in Minneapolis, there's a bunch of people that are really doing amazing work out there, maybe pairing with them and learning with them about, you know, what they're doing, what they need, how you can get involved in that. But social workers, I mean, already you're the ones that have access to the communities. You're the ones going in and out. You got to start by making yourself not be that ominous threat, right, to the safety of family and the structures of families. You got to really like try to meet communities where they are and let them know that you're not the enemy. And that's, you know, that's something in itself. So if they are having an anti-gun rally on a Saturday and you had a long week, that's okay. You can still show up and show support that Saturday. And then they see you there. They recognize this. Trust me. They recognize this.
Absolutely. So we have another question from a student. As a social work student and organizer, I believe the only way that we can see social workers and their role in upholding and perpetuating these carceral systems is through mass non-compliance with harmful programs and policies, including mandating reporting laws. The diagnostic criteria of the DSM, my daughter is really bold about
That's fine. Come on, sis. Let's get her in the camera because she a future one. She a future social worker. She gonna change the world. She gonna learn. But see, Black women, but this is what we do. We take care of, you know, this is how we do it. So ain't no issue. If anybody has an issue with that, then y'all need to check your bias because there's nothing wrong with that baby. There's nothing wrong with that baby being right there.
So in terms of the criteria of the DSM and all forms of involuntary treatment. However, social work education isn't designed to encourage mass non-compliance and frequently partners with the harmful systems. What needs to change in how social workers are trained to get more students and social workers to refuse to engage with these systems at all?
So we're going back to that policy question, right? Because these mandated reporting stuff is usually coming from the state, right? So how are we interrogating why the state has XYZ requirements? I mean, we understand what it is and we understand how disproportionately it is, it happens, right? So again, if you want to change, like you have protocols that you have to follow as part of your job. But if you want to change that, you gotta really push for those changes to be made. So I'm really advocating that we go at the policy level and that we really start collecting this real data that I've been talking about, this real evidence to be able to present to our state senators and to our governors and our mayors and saying, listen, we know that this is not effective. We know that this is actually harmful. We need to reconsider some of these mandates on what you're saying that we need to call us, like really reassess this this kind of thing. So, you know, I think that mass non-compliance, you're telling people to go on strike, right? Which, you know, we've got a history around labor movements and things like that. Your baby is giving me all the life that I need right now. I love her. You know, like we're basically telling social workers to go on strike, but that's hard to do because you have racist social workers, right? You have classist, sexist, homophobic, queerphobic social workers. You know, it's funny that people that thought Donald Trump was right. You know, and I'm going to say what it is. I don't care. Like, it's very hard for me to reconcile being an effective social worker and thinking that Donald Trump was right about anything because everything that he said was antithetical to social work practice. So, you know, really kind of really thinking about, you know, am I calling more on Black children than I am for white? Am I even noticing that when white children are being harmed?
Yes.
Because I know that's one of the first things I notice when I'm in Target.
Yes.
Like I start looking at them like, are you okay? Well, because I also live in Philadelphia and there are a lot of like white families that are living in similar circumstances and things like that. And they're acting in the same ways that, you know, some of the others are. And I'm just like, nobody sees this?
Yeah.
No, but you will see, you'll hear the Black mother threatening to spank her child, but you don't see this woman dragging her child through the, it's that kind of thing. Like, what are we doing? Are we complicit? Are we, that kind of thing? Yeah, but it's policy to me. It's all policy. And we talk about social workers being activists. That's where we need the activism to happen.
Yeah. We have another question. I hear you say people with privilege must speak out the loudest on abolition and other social justice issues. How can people who are white and have privilege speak out in a way that does not come across as white people saving people of color, right? But rather in a way that respects self-determination?
Right. That's a great question. It's close to what should white people do, which I never answer, but I think that this is a little bit more textured, and it's coming from a great place. So thank you for asking it. So a lot of it is about being honest, like I was saying earlier about the self-assessments that we have to do as social workers. It's like, look at your own body of work and look at what you've done and really think about what your approach has been to the work that you've done, and bring that into your conversations, bring that into your honesty. If you want to go on Instagram Live, for example, and just say, you know what, I've really been thinking about social work's complicity in the, the carceral state and supporting the carceral state. And I've really looked at the work that I've done. And there have been some times when I should have made a different decision. And I recognize now that it was through my own bias and things like that. People need to see that kind of honesty to feel hopeful. They need to know that there is you're a work in progress, that you really do care. And you're really taking the time to assess. Remember when I said that organizations need to assess, but individuals, we need to regularly be checking our own biases and just kind of like, what could I be doing differently? And then being honest about it and being open. And then when you talk about, again, reporting what the reality of what you see. You are like, you can be speaking up for people who are otherwise going unheard. And so again, these real stories, this real evidence and data that's right there, telling it ethnographically exactly how you encountered it is powerful. Narrative, sharing narrative and storytelling, I will always be an advocate of one of the most powerful tools for social change, is telling people's real stories.
The other method is around testimonies, right?
Yes, testimonies.
Which are extremely important now, talking about shifting, right? And using qualitative methods to find evidence that's effective.
That's it.
Communities that have been marginalized, oppressed in these multiple systems. And so
that's what we were doing with Witnesses to Hunger out of Drexel. It's all about personal testimonies in front of legislators and those people that can affect change. Listen to what the people have to say about their real lived experiences.
Absolutely. What's our next question? What are some options for disrupting the school to prison pipeline? So change the world right now with this question for us.
I just feel like, you know what? I feel like this question comes up all the time. And I just feel like in some ways I'm not trying to disregard your question. But there are so many people that have been working on this, right? And there's people that have been actually doing research, doing work, writing, publishing about this. That there's a lot of information out there. So when you ask me like, what are some options? It's like, I want to kind of redirect you to the experts and stuff. I'm not working on the school to prison pipeline, but one of the first options is getting rid of programs like, I don't want to name because they may want to come sue me, but some of these programs that are giving a couple of months of training to people and then shipping them to the poor neighborhoods to go and teach. You know what I'm talking about. Like they have no cultural competency, no understanding of what is happening in these communities, but they're supposed to go in and teach. Or these social workers who go to these big cities and get their big city master's degree, and I'm gonna go work in Harlem and North Philly and the Ninth Ward and and I'm gonna make a change. Yeah, okay. Like that doesn't help, because you're getting into these places and you are functioning. You are trauma. These students are coming in and seeing you and they're like, you remind me of the person that just took me out my mama's house. You Why are you here? You know, you look like that, you know, that oppressor. You know, some options for disrupting the school to prison pipeline, like stop putting kids in jail. I mean, it's kind of, again, why are we handcuffing children?
Yes.
Why do we have police officers inside of schools with guns and handcuffs who are handcuffing 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old children? Who decided that that's okay? And why, like, and the school social workers and the teachers are the ones who have to be able to push back and say no. And like a lot of teachers say, well, we need the help and we need the support. We have to start a lot earlier so that these children are not getting to 5th grade and wanting to beat you up, right? And I understand that it's hard. I know that it's hard, but calling the police, having the police there to further traumatize and terrorize these children, damaging them possibly for life, is not the answer. Also, my biggest thing is looking in the communities and looking at sexual assault within our communities and how that contributes. People don't necessarily link it with school, but I think that it's the fact that it's not being identified by the teachers and the administrators, because if the communities are already riddled with sexual violence, they're not able to distinguish and determine. It's up to those of us that are doing this kind of work to be able to identify that this is what's happening, and a lot of that identification would happen from school administrators. So a lot of that, I think that there's a direct connection between those two. School to prison, I'm teaching people right now, you know, that I love their energy and enthusiasm, but at a college level, they're not writing past 6th or 7th grade levels. So, you know, again, what I said is setting up an exploitable labor force. People were passing them along, did not care that these people could not read or write, just passing them along. And it was that lack of, you know, and not necessarily lack of care, but maybe they were caught up in bureaucratic red tape and were forced to do so. But where was the courage to say, no, you cannot put this child into this next grade. They cannot read, you know, so it's those kinds of things. And then getting social workers in the schools, like I said earlier.
Absolutely.
The fact that there are schools that have no social workers is still an abomination. It's ridiculous.
Yes, absolutely. So our next question is, social work is in colonial North America and is co-related to the dispossession of indigenous peoples. How do we not fall into the trap of legitimizing settler, I feel like I'm having a tongue twister here, settler colonialism, even in our progressive social work practices, including abolition? I love that question.
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me just read it again, because just so I can practice it. Okay. How do we not fall in the trap of legitimizing settler colonialism? That's a great question. It's hard to avoid, right? Because, well, I mean, okay. So there's this debate. Like, I do not consider myself a settler colonizer. I'm not here of my own will, and so I think that kind of centering the work of those of us who understand what that, like, displacement, entrapment, enslavement, all of that, like, I think that centering us in our work and our approaches, taking guidance from us, making sure that we are not crafting programs that reflect that settler, ideal, and that colonizing ideal is super important, so that divesting, education. Again, what does the education say? First year, decolonizing social work, really bringing up this kind of information into the space early on, teaching our students, like, understand that this is fundamentally rooted in this thing. Your job is to not do this, So it does happen with the education, but also kind of looking at some of the protocols and practices that, some of our agencies and organizations have, like really assessing them and even evaluating how they rank on the, the settler colonizing, scale or whatever. Is this, is our practice of child removal, fall in line with this history of, extracting children from indigenous families, extracting African children, putting people in boarding schools, putting people here and there? Like, are we mimicking that same thing? That's that's internal assessments that need to happen. Yeah, it's a tough one. Yeah, like, you all want us to save the world today, and I get it. we're working on it, right? But I think, so I just want to say generally, I think that even by the questions you're asking, you already have some ideas, and maybe somebody to tell you, to give you that push, start working on it. That thing you've been thinking about. Yeah, you're probably right, because we got nothing but options to try at this point. Seriously,
that's it. That's a good point, Feminista and Talent. given the questions that are being asked, right? Folks are wrestling with, how do I do
thinking about it, right? Yeah. So let's do it. And then take that question to 3 or 4 of your colleagues.
Yeah.
And say, let's all sit with this. What can we do? Let's brainstorm. Let's try to hack something out, and come up with a possible plan.
Absolutely. Next question, please. How would you suggest the Black community support the Asian community?
By doing everything they've been doing for the last few decades. I actually hate this question. I actually wrote about this on Instagram. I'm actually offended by it because it suggests that we're not supporting the Asian community. And we have plenty of evidence throughout Black civil rights and Black power struggle of Black people working with Asian people for Asian people. There's a documentary, I forget the name of it, of like Asian activists talking about how they learned so much from Black people and were working with them in the 60s and 70s and beyond. So I kind of resent that there's even a need to question that. I think what we need to talk about a little bit more is how can we get the Asian community to divest of its anti-Blackness. And then before not saying that, we can't help, because Black people are going to help everybody, even people that hate us. That is just what we do, because we understand that when Black people are liberated, it leads to all people being liberated. But we do need to have some very serious conversations about anti-Blackness within Asian communities and how that may hinder the partnerships and collaborations that we can do. Again, I am in Philadelphia, and I look at every corner store that is illegally selling liquor to poison, to people that are suffering with substance abuse. They're all owned by Asian people. So when we try to have conversations about how we can work to make sure that they're not facilitating this kind of thing, it's, want no parts, not, I don't care, don't live in this community, things like that. So those are the things I think we need to really have those honest conversations about before we start asking, like, how can the Black community support the Asian community, right? Hate crime against Black people, is over 2,300 Black people have experienced like being killed or hurt as a result of racism in the last couple of years versus, I was looking at this chart yesterday, something like 215 Asian people. And we're not doing oppression Olympics, but we need to stop acting like Black people have not been actively working to support Asian people across the board, Indigenous people, Latinx people. We all have. And so,
Last question. Okay. Last year, when we asked you about a solution-oriented approach to racial and economic inequality at SWER, you said there's no such things as handouts, just like you can't spoil a baby. It resonated then and even more now for our current conversation we're having today, and that it echoes many of the principles of abolition thought. Can you think about the ways in which, moving forward, what does that mean in our work? What should that look like? Right? And what does it mean to not have handouts, but to do the work?
Yeah, so we're talking about social work. Social work is really kind of based on like social welfare policy, right? And so what is social welfare, right? We can talk about Mimi Abramovitz and others who say that everybody's on welfare in some way or another. So kind of rethinking what it means to help people, right? And so somewhere along the line, help got associated with handouts and laziness and all this kind of stuff, because you have this capitalist system that needs poor people to stay poor, right? So I don't believe that there's handouts when you're helping people, when you are assisting people, when you are working with people, when you are giving people the essential things that they need to survive. Again, I'm going to go back to Philadelphia, and I'm talking about this gun violence and where it's coming from. We had a city, of all the cities with 1 million plus people, we have the highest poverty rate, 26%. More than 1 in 4 people lives in poverty. And half of those people live in deep poverty. What does that mean? That we have people who live in households that don't even get $12,000 a year. Okay. You want to talk about marginalization and the desperation of what's happening? Why are they selling drugs? They need to make money. Why are they stealing food? Because they need to eat. Why are they carrying around guns? Because they're afraid that somebody is going to rob them because that person needs money. So we have to really kind of think about, what can we do to help these people in these situations, rather than just look at, the gun violence. Oh my gosh. We really need to start healing the wounds. Give the people food. Yes. Give the people healthy housing. Give the people health care. Give them education. Put money in their pockets. And like the fact that we balk at that, we balk at the idea of actually just giving the people what they need, right? It's like when you're meeting with somebody for the first time and you got to do an intake assessment, the person's sitting there and their stomach is growling and you don't offer them a sandwich, but you want to tell them about where they can go to get a pantry, or you want to put them on a plan to budget their food stamps. But the person's stomach is growling right now. Why are you not giving them a sandwich? And why do we as social workers balk at that? Right? So there is no such thing as a handout when you are giving people the fundamental things they need to survive.
Yes.
It doesn't work that way. You know, and we keep looking at it like that. Excuse me, I have to get my charge on my computer.
No worries.
Yeah. You know, so I think about that and kind of how that when we're talking about abolition, just stop doing it. Like, I know that's hard. I know that it's hard, particularly for the people who are just like, you know, the thing they always want to go to. You're an abolitionist. What about rapists? Only 1% of rapists go to jail. So what's the point? We already have a system that allows 99% of rapists to walk free. What about the rapists? You're not doing the job that you're supposed to do, carceral state. What about the murderers and stuff? The biggest murderers are the cops. And the state are the biggest murderers, right? You're killing people every day by denying them healthy food and healthy housing. You're killing people every day by denying them health care. So what about the murderers, right? We always want to go to that first, rather than consider that in the prisons is largely people who have not done anything that is, you know, in my opinion, that is worth the taxpayers' dollars paying for 3 hots and a cot, you know, for people that could actually be at home learning how to function differently, or we gave them resources. I'm big on alternatives to incarceration. That's my jam. So I always think that there's other possibilities than sitting people in a cold cell and further destroying and disrupting their mental health, and further making it even more difficult for them to reenter society and be productive. So, you know, I'm always thinking about stuff like that.
Yes. And as you think about it, and as we wrap up, can you recommend any books or resources in terms of how we can learn more about abolition and go about creating or reimagining, right, a system in which we operate in?
Yeah, so I definitely think Dr. Angela Davis has written about this, and she did this talk a couple of months ago. If you might be able to find it on YouTube, Angela Davis on Abolition, where she really was kind of bringing her past work into this time right now that I thought was really important. For those of you that are on social media, there's a lot of people that are really reimagining new things, new ways of being. Kind of look at there's a sister, Nikema Washington, out in Minneapolis, that is doing some great work. I sit on a board for a foundation that she has, that she's I should say the ED of. Who else is out here? There's some folks that are really I recommend social media, honestly. Look at just the defund the police hashtag. You might be coming across some folks that are doing some really important writing and research on this. I'm also looking at alternatives to incarceration. Usually when you look up Michelle Alexander and New Jim Crow, you find other resources, and look at who's citing her, right? Look at some of the newer thinkers that are citing her and citing Dr. Davis. That's how I usually do it. I usually do the reverse search to see who's coming out with the new thoughts. But yeah, definitely start with Angela Davis, because she's always considered race, gender, and class in all of her analyses as a Black feminist. And so I really like what she has to say. Are prisons obsolete? Yeah, that's the book. Are prisons obsolete? Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Of
course. Awesome. It was nice to reconnect again. And
You're like my soul sister. You're great.
Yeah, I feel the same way. So it's been a pleasure to be able to be in conversation with you, right? To push social work to think differently about what it means to do the work that we're doing. And as an educator, what does it mean for me to teach, right? How to do this, right? And how do I do it boldly to reimagine something that can be better for the people that they're going out to work with, right? And so we thank you. We thank you. And I think Dean Detloff is going to come back on to join us to wrap it back up.
Yes, thank you so much. Feminista, we so appreciate you at the Graduate College of Social Work. You know, your comments to that last question about just giving people what they need, resonates so much with the work that we've been doing, particularly the work we're doing at the college focusing on abolition of the child welfare system. Those of us doing that work, we say all the time, we have this system that takes children away from their parents, mostly for neglect, which is largely related to poverty. And then here in Texas, we then put those children in the home of a stranger and pay that stranger $900 a month to take care of somebody else's child. What if we just
tell them, Alan,
$900 a month? But society doesn't think that's okay. The government thinks it's okay to give that money to a stranger, but won't give it to a parent who's struggling. It's
because we've racialized it, right? And so that's Philadelphia's poverty issue, because the city is 43% Black. We've racialized poverty, completely ignoring all of the white communities that are living in poverty. They're casualties of the racism, right? So it's no, we don't want to give $900 to a poor Black parent. That's what it is. We want to give it to somebody else we've decided is worthy of it. The values assessment. We don't even need to know them. We just know they're better than this one. And come on, Alan, you gotta tell them. It just doesn't make any sense at all. No sense at all.
Well, thank you so much. As I said, we really value you so much here in the college. I mean, I've been watching our students on Twitter. They're super excited about this conversation right now. We just really appreciate you being always willing to come and talk to us. And we learned so much from your wisdom.
I'm here. Hopefully, maybe next time I'll be Dr. FJ by then.
You will be.
I can't wait.
Thank you all so much.
And Quinette, thank you as always. For all of you watching, thank you so much. If you're interested in learning more, all of the events in our Eyes on Abolition series are on our website. This is our 5th event in our Eyes on Abolition series that actually started last fall. So if you're interested in looking at learning more about this topic, please visit our website. It's uh.edu/socialwork, and you can look at all of the recorded versions of our prior events. Follow us on social media. I hope you'll keep sharing your thoughts. And our last event this semester, I hope you'll join us for that. That is April 27th, featuring author Reginald Dwayne Betts, who will be speaking about his book, which is a series of poems entitled Felon. So April 27th, we'll be sending more information about that. Thank you all for being part of our community. Thank you all for being part of our event today. Thank you.